The definition of an imaginary number all comes from -1. If you ever have a negative number under the square root, you know your answer is going to be imaginary. You can never, ever, ever take the square root of a negative number without imaginary numbers. I is called the imaginary unit, and it's how we tell the person reading our paper that we are talking about imaginary numbers. If I just write down 2, that's a normal number, but as soon as I add the I afterwards, imaginary 2. Imaginary numbers have their own number line, yeah.
You misspelled what happened when we did 2 D's.
Well, that's Mr. Baker made these notes, So I equals the square root of -1. That is the definition of an imaginary number. And in order for us to simplify a square root, we take out the -1, turn it into an I, and then we do everything exactly the same. So we've done these. So grab your calculator. The square root of -2 we saw was 2I. And now, there's one thing I also would like to talk about here when we get down a little farther. What about the square root of -9? 3I. And what about the square root of -20? Is it a gross nasty decimal? Yes, it is. So we have to actually simplify the square root like we did yesterday. Because do we write gross nasty decimals down? Never. Because that means rounding. We don't like to round. What perfect square can you split -20 into? 4 times 5. But here's the thing. If I just write 4 times 5, what does that multiply to? 20. We want it to multiply to -20. So I also have to multiply this by -1. So we break down -20 into 4 times 5 times -1. And now 2 of these we know how to take the square root of. We know the square root of 4, and we also know the square root of -1 now. Square root of 5, gross nasty decimal. So square root of 5 is going to stay chilling. -1 becomes, what's the square root of -1? I. And the square root of 4 is 2. In order to simplify the square root of -20, it becomes 2I square root of 5. Note, did I write I too? No. This isn't Will Smith's I, Robot. It's 2I. Have you ever seen that movie? Great movie. It's a great movie. 2I square root of 5. I is kind of like a variable. It goes behind our number and attached. Simplified. Okay. Now let's go do another. In Algebra 1, you have probably heard a million times 2 things. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. Golden rule of algebra. And you've probably heard that you do the opposites to both sides, right? If I'm subtracting 5, I want to add 5 to both sides. That's the opposite. And you guys know your opposites, because if I say what's the opposite of adding, you would probably say, and if I said the opposite of multiplying, you would say dividing. Now, maybe you haven't thought this much into the future, but exponents, x squared, also has an opposite. What is the opposite of squaring something? There's a reason that the buttons are in the same place. What button is also above the x squared? A little blue. See it? Square root. That's why those buttons are in the same spot. The opposite of squaring a number is square rooting a number. Those are opposites, just like adding and subtracting, multiplying, dividing. Squaring and square rooting are opposites. So if we're solving this little baby equation, and I draw my little waterfall down the equal sign, yes, waterfall. If I want to undo an x to the power of 2, I use the opposite operation, which is a square root. Just like if this was a 2x, I would divide both sides by 2, because that's the opposite of multiplying. The opposite of this little square is a Square root. And if I do a square root to the left side, I have to do a square root to the right side, because golden rule of algebra, whatever you do to the left, you do to the right. Now, what is the square root of x squared? What times itself is x squared? X, right? X times x is x squared. This square root is just getting rid of the squared, leaving us with just x. On the right side, we have to take the square root of 25. And I'm going to be a little mean, okay? The square root of 25 is 5. And what else? This equation has two answers. 5 is not the only number multiplied by itself that gives you 25. There's another one. Negative 5. 5 times 5 is 25, and negative 5 times negative 5 is 25. This has two solutions. Two. Little did you know, every square root you take ever has two answers. Two. It has a positive and it has a negative. Instead of writing two things down, there's another way to write it in math. I write x equals positive or minus 5, and this is what the symbol looks like. It's called a plus or minus. It's not that creative. Plus or minus 5. It's literally a plus with a minus under it. It's literally, they could have come up with anything cool, but that's what they came up with. When you take a square root, you always have two answers. Plus and minus. Every time. Yeah. Nothing? Always plus or minus. Plus or minus 5. Let's do another. What are you going to do first? You're going to squiggly. Waterfall. Just like we did before, what do I do to both sides? I have to get rid of the square, because we really don't care what x squared is equal to. We want to know what x equals. That's the whole point of an equation. So I do the opposite to both sides. I square root it. Now, on the left side, it's easy peasy, because the square root just gets rid of the squared, leaving us with x. On the right side, however, a little trickier, because 75 is not a perfect square, is it? No. So we're going to do what we did yesterday, the day and Friday. What do I split 75 up into? I need a perfect square. 5 is not a perfect square. 25 times 3. 25 times 3. I'm probably going to yell at you in a second. Are you ready? What is our answer? Cam?
What's that plus sign next line?
That is called a plus or minus, because our answer is not just positive 5, but also negative 5. What do I do? What's my answer? What's my next thing I'm writing on the right side? What do you know? Do you know the square root of 25, or do you know the square root of 3? What's the square root of 25? Which one is it? Or is it both? It's both. The square root of 25 is plus or minus 5. And where's the 3 still? No, it's not. Wait till you're an adult and have to work an 8-hour day. When you take the square root, you will always write what? Plus or minus. Every time. All the time. It's our new norm. This whole time, your whole life, whoever taught you square roots, they've lied to you. It's always been plus or minus. Always.
Did Miss Buden watch this video?
Miss Buden?
Yeah, I'm snitching on you.
On me?
Yeah.
What did I do?
You said they lied to us. She told me.
They did. They never told you about the minus, did they?
She did. You got the book still.
Okay, here we go. Next. Well, yeah, we're getting a little crazy. So, we are going to be solving quadratic equations doing exactly what we just did. You just solved two quadratic equations. A quadratic equation is called a quadratic equation solely because of its exponent. What is this equation's largest exponent? Its only exponent is... If an equation's largest exponent is 2, it is a quadratic equation. All automatically. If you see an exponent of 2 and no other exponent's bigger, it is a quadratic equation. In Algebra 1, you were chilling with straight lines pretty much the whole year. Not us. We're all about them curvy graphs. This year's all about curves. Squiggles. This is the land of the squiggles. No straight lines. If you have an exponent of 2, it is a quadratic. And now quadratics can have no solutions. It could have one solution. Or it could have 2 solutions. Never 3. 0, 1, or 2. So after we solve this, we're going to determine how many solutions does our quadratic have. Does it have 1 real, 2 real, no reals, or in other words, 2 imaginary. So here we go. Squiggle down the equal sign. Do it. Quack. I like to quack when I do my waterfall. Quack. Yep, do it. I'll get you one day. Okay. Now, our first thing with solving a quadratic is we need the x squared by itself. We don't want to take the square root at the beginning because otherwise we have to square root a lot of things and that's no fun. We save the square rooting till last. We don't want to do it until the x squared is all by itself. Is the x squared by itself? X, no, look, there's a -3 chilling, there's a +4 chilling, they need to go away. So what should we move? To get x squared all alone, loner, loser, we need this by itself. When you solve equations, you want to do it in reverse order of operation. So what should I move first? Say it. We don't want to move the -3, because that's multiplying. We want to do the adding and subtracting first. How do I move +4 to the right? I want this gone. What do I add or subtract to +4 to make it 0? I -4, because what's 4 minus 4? Look, we strategically picked -4 because now they add up to 0. But I can't just do it to the left. I have to do it to the right. Never forget it. You know, when SpongeBob's teaching Squidward to blow bubbles, he's like, land on your left foot. And then he says, what? Don't forget it. You know what I'm talking about? And then he says, bring it around town. You know what I'm talking about? Land on your left foot. Don't forget it. Do it to both sides. Don't forget it. You don't get water. Pinky's up. Have you seen that one? Okay, here we go. Yep, see? Bring it down, drop it low. Everything you don't touch has to come down. Don't leave it behind. 10 minus 4 is 6. Okay, x squared isn't by itself yet. We have to get rid of that number in front of the x squared. -3. Ew, yucky. We have to do the opposite operation. What is the opposite of -3 times x squared? Division. This means multiplication, so the opposite would be to divide both sides by -3. Cross out your -3s, because -3 divided by -3 is just 1x. In this case, it's an x squared. So drop your x squared. 6 divided by -3 is -2. And now we're down to the fun part, the best part, the new part. Because new is good, because it means we learning. What do I do to get rid of this pesky squared? What is the opposite of squaring something? Square root. So I'm going to square root not just one side, but both sides. Don't forget it. The square root of x squared is just x. Because x times x is x squared. That's the square root. On the right side, uh-oh, square root of negative 2, ew. Are we going to have real answers or imaginary answers? And we know that because, what is this? A negative number is always going to be imaginary. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to split up, and I'm just going to do this off to the side, okay? So I have the square root of negative 2. What am I going to split this into? What times what? Close, not negative 2 times 1, 2 times negative 1. And we're splitting it up like that because what is the square root of negative 1? What is it? I. When you take the square root of a negative 1, you get I. So I goes out front, and what number goes in our square root? What's left over? A 2. You have to write the I, yes. It's imaginary. Yes. It's gotta have a curve. What? What square root? This? Square root that. Oh, the square root got rid of the squared. They undid each other. And now I made a big uh-oh because whenever you take the square root, what do you get? Not just a positive, but a. Our answer isn't just I square root of 2, it's also negative I square root of 2. So I have to put my plus or minus. Yay! We did it! Now guess what? Okay, so did this equation have 2 real solutions, 1 real solution, or 2 imaginary? 2 imaginary. A positive and a negative I squared root of 2. So 2 imaginary. And we knew that right at this step. Right when we got there, we knew. We knew it was going to be 2 imaginary. Okay, here we go. Example 2. Let the fun begin. What do we do first? Draw your waterfall and quack like a duck. Quack. Close. Okay. Before we start doing things, okay? What is my goal? What am I getting by itself in this problem? I have to get the x squared all alone. That's your goal. That's goal 1. We need x squared by itself so I can take the square root of both sides. Now this is yucky. Those of you who have started, is it yucky? It is yucky. But it is what it is. So, to get x squared by itself, what am I moving first? Before the 4. We do have to move the 4. What do I want to do before that, though? Before that. Whatever is being added or subtracted needs to go away first. The opposite of subtracting 25 is adding 25. Now, if you did choose to divide by 4 first, you are setting yourself up for a world of nastiness. This is the way. 4x squared equals 0 plus 25, which is 25. Now, remember what I said about decimals. Don't do it. Don't write decimals on your paper. Don't do it, because next, now like Michael said, we are going to do what to both sides? Divide by 4, because our goal is getting x squared by itself. And now, I know you want to, and I bet some of you have already done it. You probably plugged in 25 divided by 4 in your calculator. And why is that yucky? Because it's a decimal. No, we don't do those. We're going to keep it as 25 over 4. We're going to keep it as 25 over 4, but I promise it's way better this way. In order to get rid of our squared, what do we do to both sides? In order to get rid of the x squared, I want it to just be x. Square root. Now, here's where you have to watch very carefully. I have to square root not just one side, but both sides completely. So I need to square root the x squared. And I have to square root everything on the right side. So I have to square root the 25, and I have to square root the 4. Everything. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the right side. Everything on the left, everything on the right. The square root of x squared is just x. That's why we chose square root, because we want to get rid of the squared. On the right side, what do I get when I square root the top? 5. What do I get when I square root 4? So what's my answer? 5/2, but not just 5/2. Also, say it. Not imaginary. Whenever you take the square root, how many answers do you have every time? 2. Positive, negative, plus or minus 5 over 2. 2 answers. This equation had no imaginaries. It didn't have one solution. It had 2 real solutions. Positive 2, positive 5/2, negative 5/2. 2 real. You know what they say? You gotta get real, huh? Next. Aren't you having fun? What do we do first? I know no one's doing it because I don't hear it.
We're not saying it.
Do it! Draw your waterfall and... Wow, look at that. Whack. Subtract 2? I agree. Step 1. Get rid of the 84. Subtract it on both sides. Minus 84. Because what's our goal right now? It's getting what by itself? The x squared. And he is having a party and we need to kick everyone out. 5x squared equals negative 36 minus 84 is 120. Yay. Negative 120. Now what? Divide both sides by 5. Do it. Wah. 5 are gone. X squared equals negative 24. Right now, can you tell if you were going to have real or imaginary answers? I can tell. Can you tell? What kind of numbers on the right? So if the right number is negative, that means they're going to be imaginary. Yep. Because our next step is to get rid of the x squared, and I do that by taking what on both sides? Square root. Look, we already know there's going to be not 1, but 2 imaginary answers, right? Because when we take the square root of negative 24, we're going to get a plus or minus something with an I. So off to the side, we have to simplify it. Square root of negative 24. Can I divide 24 by a perfect square? 4. So we're going to split this into 4 times what? 4 times 6, but I need one more thing. A negative 1. 4 times 6 is positive 24. It's negative, so I need to add the negative 1. I know 2 of these square roots. I know this one, and I know this one. Because we all live in a world of make-believe. What's the square root of 4? What's the square root of negative 1? Do we know the square root of 6? Nope, so he stays behind. Loser. He doesn't get to join the world of imagination. See this right here? Imagination land. Okay, so now I'm going to write my final answer, and I'm going to be very carefully, not just randomly write stuff down. It's x equals, don't ruin my day, say it, plus or minus 2I root 6. 2 imaginary, positive 2I root 6 and negative 2I root 6. Yay, we did it. Next. Oh my gosh, we have 3 more? Aren't you guys lucky? Here we go, here we go. I don't know, can you? What do we do first? Chris, before you can go, do it, or you can't go.
Squealing.
And?
What?
Water right here.
Hey, look, are you seeing the pattern? What do we do now? What do we do now? Go, do it, say it. Subtract 24. Drop everything down. 4x squared equals, what is 9 minus 24? Negative 15. What do I do to both sides? What do I do to both sides? Divide by 4. Am I going to put that in the calculator and write down an icky, yucky, nasty decimal? No, so we leave it a fraction. X squared equals negative 15 over 4. Now we're to the best part, the new part, the fun part, the exciting part. Can you tell if we're going to have imaginary or real solutions? Imagination. Because what's on the right side? A negative number. So we are going to square root both sides, but I can't just square root one of my numbers, I have to square root both. Square root at the top, square root at the bottom. Is negative 15 a perfect square? No. What? How would I write the square root of negative 15 better? What would I split this into? Can you divide 15 by a perfect square? Nope. But I do need to break something apart. I need to break it into 15 times negative 1. What is the square root of negative 1? So this is I square root of 15. That's our new top. I square root of 15. On the bottom, do we know the square root of 4? It's just 2. Uh-oh, I made a boo-boo. What didn't I write? Plus or minus. One of you is not going to do it, and when you do, I'm writing a very passive-aggressive note on your test. I'm going to write, why do you hate me? And how dare you? Don't forget your plus or minus. If you take a square root, it doesn't matter if it's negative, positive, anything. It's plus or minus. For now and forever. And guess what? Your calculator doesn't even know it. When you put it in your calculator, it only tells you the positive answer, but you just add a little minus in front. Now it's good. Next. How about you start this one off? Squiggly, back like that. Go. You gotta give it more like grass. There, I give it like 6 out of 10. That's like a 9 out of 10. Have you never heard it up? Because they sound Is that the opposite? Subtracting 34? And the reason you're doing it is because you want it to end up being 0. If you add 34 to negative 34, they add up 2. If you subtract the 34, you get negative 68, and that's not 0. And then you can't cross it out. And then you've made an equation that's harder to solve. What is 128 plus 34? 162. And you do what to both sides? Can you divide 162 by 6? You can? You get lucky? Oh, you lucky ducks. Lucky whack. X squared equals 27. What do you do to both sides? Square root it. Is the square root of 27 an acceptable answer? No, it's not. Because what perfect square can you split 27 into? 9 times 3. What is square root of 9? 3. So we're left with 3 square root of 3. What is my final answer? Plus or minus 3 root 3. What kind of solutions did we have? We had 2 real solutions. Positive 3 root 3 and negative 3 root 3. No imaginary. No imagination land. What do we got? Una mas? Oh, the big one. The curveball. I always had a curveball, okay? It's not math unless you leave here hating it. Right? I'll just dump it on you right before the bell rings. Here we go. Ew. Waterfall. Dying duck over here. Why is this one kind of icky? It has x squareds on both sides. Do we want x squareds on both sides? No, we want them both on the same side. So what should I probably move? Yeah, I want this over there with its best friend, 12. So this is a positive 3x squared, so I will subtract 3x squared. And we bring our best friends together forever. And they combine to create 1, 9x squared, and drop everything else low. Now look, it pretty much looks like how it always looks. What do I do to both sides? What do I do? I want the x squared by itself. I gotta move these two things. What do I move first? Add 12. I know you did. But I wanted more people to say it. What do I do to both sides? Divide by 3. Yep. Divide by 3. Very good, class. X squared equals, yee! 30 divided by 9, is that a very nice number? No, so let's keep it nice and keep it as 30 over 9. What do I do to both sides? Do it now. Have you done it? Debris is taking a nap. Let the YouTube video know that Jabri is sleeping in the bath. Now everyone will know. Square root of both sides. Top and bottom. Top and bottom. 30, is that a perfect square? No. Can you divide 30 by any perfect squares? 5 is not a perfect square. In your list of perfect squares, can you divide 30 by anything?
Good morning, Tiger Nation.
You can't.
Today's Tuesday, October
Can you divide?
3rd, and these are your morning
What's perfect square is 9?
Buenos dias,
3, so our final answer is x equals.
Gloria Estefan.
But what do I need in front?
Singer, songwriter, actress, and businesswoman.
That's our minus.
Estefan is a 7-time Grammy Award winner.
Well done.
Medal of Freedom recipient, and has been named one of the top